Following yet another deadly shooting by a federal officer in Minnesota, state leaders say they want to be a part of the investigation. But the Department of Homeland Security says the investigation belongs to them. That dynamic puts the state and federal government at odds over the shooting death of 37-year-old Minneapolis resident and ICU nurse Alex Pretti. Live now to former Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Kerlikowske. Thank you so much for talking to us today. I can't imagine that this case isn't completely weighing on you so much. Right off the top, this case, as well as the fatal shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis, a lot of Minnesota officials say they'd like to be a part of the investigation. So as a former commissioner who knows this process, is it unusual that the federal government will take over and not allow state or local police to have anything to do with the investigation?
Yeah, it's not only unusual, it's completely unprecedented. When I was commissioner, if a Border Patrol agent used deadly force, and sometimes they did, quite often the Department of Public Safety, for instance, in Texas, the local sheriff or even a local police department, depending on where the jurisdiction was able to participate and be a part of that investigation, along with which was routine for the criminal civil rights investigation to be opened by the FBI. And now no one seems to know what this current investigation is and what information they're trying to gather and how they're going to even release it. So I think it's wise to be very skeptical of what's going on.
If you were in charge, how would you be doing things differently?
Well, as the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, you could direct that the investigations from the Office of Professional Standards, that's like the internal affairs of CBP, they would cooperate and coordinate with local authorities. And of course, the FBI would oftentimes do very much the same thing. Remember, we have a whole long history of federal law enforcement communicating, cooperating, working closely with their state and local partners. So to have this situation where they've been excluded from even gathering information is unprecedented.
In the desire to be fair to all parties, is there any scenario where excluding local police could be seen as protective of the investigation that you can see?
No, because I would think that given all the uses of force by police departments, sheriff's departments, state police around the country, those investigations are just very common, and they're common to be done in coordination with other entities. Any attempt to exclude or to potentially hide information from state and local authorities just raises the concern of the citizens. You know, transparency is kind of the coin of the realm. And so you would think that they would want to be transparent, but that has not been the case at all.
We've seen video. So many people have seen the video, the killing of Alex Pretti, from so many different vantage points. And it seems like the interpretation of that video is vastly different between state leaders, local leaders, and federal leaders. When you look at that video, which way does the wind blow with you?
Well, I would think that when they recovered the gun that he had, which he had legally and lawfully, the shots were fired almost simultaneously with the time that other agent is bringing the gun out. So I think there is a question whether those other people knew that the gun had been recovered, that he had been disarmed. I think it's still a bit early to categorize exactly what has happened, but I would think an open, coordinated investigation with state and local authorities would go a long way to satisfying the demands of the public to know what's going on, and the demands of, as we saw, members of Congress and the media.
Yeah, not the least of which Alex Pretti's family as well. We also know President Trump has deployed border czar Tom Homan to Minneapolis today. So what can he do there on the ground in his official capacity? What would you like to see him do to try to turn the temperature down and start to see trust once again be built?
Yeah, so what happened after that killing of Ms. Good was that Tom Homan had made a statement about, it's still too early for him to tell, and I'd like to see the investigation. Well, almost immediately, President Trump, the vice president, and Secretary Kristi Noem all came out and said, oh no, this shooting is absolutely justified, and there's no reason to go any further. The Deputy Attorney General came out and said, well, there's no reason for the FBI to investigate. You can't make those determinations that quickly. Well, unfortunately for Mr. Holman, he had to turn around then and say the same narrative. But I know Tom, I worked with him for a number of years, the 3 years that I was commissioner. I would hope that he would bring some light and some reasonable to this. And also, I think that it would be really important for people like Stephen Miller and Secretary Noem to back off the stage, because as the Wall Street Journal said today, they are not credible spokespersons.
We will be covering President Trump's conversation with reporters from the Wall Street Journal a little bit later in this broadcast. For now, Gil Kerlikowske, thank you so much for your perspectives today. We appreciate you so much. So joining us now is Rosa Brooks, a Georgetown law professor and former Washington, D.C. Reserve Police officer. Thank you so much, Rosa, for choosing to talk to us today. The Department of Homeland Security leading the investigation. Is it normal for DHS to cordon off the area, not allow local police in, and then keep local and state police out of the investigation?
No, absolutely not. And it's not normal for a judge to have to order the federal government not to destroy evidence. Usually we assume the federal government's not going to destroy evidence, and it says something about the moment we're in that's a real worry. But no, normally federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, state level coordinate pretty effectively together. And that's, I think, part of the reason that we ended up with this horrific shooting and with so many incidents of violence is that we've seen federal agents come in without any apparent interest in working collaboratively with local authorities. So you get a scene of just total chaos where you have agents who are not familiar with the city, not familiar with the community, frankly, not well trained, and it's basically a recipe for catastrophe and tragedy.
How crucial is the information at a scene immediately after something like this?
It's vital. Immediately after, that's when you can see, marks on the pavement. You can see everything from, foot scuffs to, I'd say it, blood patterns to where shell casings have fallen. You can evaluate the angles a vehicle and people were at during the incident. And if you can't get that information right away, it obviously hampers any resulting investigation.
What's the risk then if that information is only in the hands of one side and not both sides?
I think we're at a moment when the credibility of the federal government is extremely low in the eyes of many people, and particularly in the eyes of many citizens of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota. And it's a moment where what one would like to see would be federal officials saying from the very beginning, hey, this is a terrible tragedy. We are going to find out what happened. There's going to be an investigation. We're going to be transparent. We're going to release all of the facts. And we want to hear your concerns. And instead, we have, I think, the polar opposite. We have very, very senior U.S. government officials essentially saying, we've already decided what happened, that this was a domestic terrorist who brandished a weapon. And those facts, that does not seem to be supported by the actual facts. So there was a rush to judgment by the very officials who should have been being scrupulously neutral and scrupulously careful.
What is the danger when the investigation and the investigating party rushes to judgment like that, gets a head start on setting a narrative?
I mean, it's so dangerous on so many levels. I mean, first, just at the narrowest possible level, it becomes very hard to find out what actually happened. And again, going back to that issue of having to have a judge order the federal government not to destroy evidence. My God, that's not the kind of thing that you normally think that you need to have a judge do. So number one, you sacrifice potentially the truth. But number two, I think the damage to just the credibility of the authorities here is devastating. The federal government and the state and local authorities need to have the trust of local people. And when they lose that completely by appearing to not actually care about the truth, it's really, really hard to get it back.
I just want to ask you about the video, because it seems like it depends on which set of eyes are looking at the video, because one person, one group will come to a very quick conclusion. Another group comes to another conclusion. Nowhere is there peace found or even truth, right? As you look at that video, right now, and you've seen it from several different angles. You've seen both interpretations. Given your expertise in the past, what do you think happened here?
I think we've got a best case scenario and a worst case scenario.
Okay.
The worst case scenario is that we saw a helpless man who had been disarmed and who had not been brandishing a weapon in the first place, who was behaving peacefully. We saw a helpless man being murdered in cold blood. I think that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, frankly, is not a whole lot better than that, because the best case scenario, we see a bunch of agents who are clearly poorly trained, executing incredibly poor tactics. They're not communicating with each other. They're all mobbing towards the one guy, and then we see a firearm that is being discharged into a scrum of agents. I mean, leaving aside anything else, right? Just the horrifically negligent tactics there. The agent who fired the first shot could easily have killed another agent. That you don't fire your gun where you don't know where that bullet's going to end up. And in fact, all those bullets ended up in the body of one man. But it was a situation in which it would have been extremely easy for any one of the agents to kill another agent or to kill another innocent bystander. So, best case scenario, you've got chaos, you've got poor tactics leading to a preventable tragedy, that you had the kind of confusion and reflex shooting. And this is something that all police train very hard to avoid. One shot gets fired, all the other officers panic and they think, uh-oh, somebody's shooting, maybe I should be shooting too, and they start firing without having a very clear sense of what they're firing at or why. It's pretty clear that, again, best case scenario, that started to happen there, that you got a panicky agent. They weren't sure what was going on. They didn't notice that Pretti had already been disarmed. You get one shot fired and then other agents start sympathetic firing just out of sheer panic and adrenaline. That's not a great situation either. That you put poorly trained people into an explosive situation. And again, best case, you get tragedy. Worst case, you get intentional murder.
Rosa Brooks, thank you so much. Hope to talk to you again here on CBS News 24/7.
Joining me right now for more on this story is Deborah Fleischaker. She is the former executive secretary for the Department of Homeland Security and the former chief of staff at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement under the Biden administration. First off, thank you for being here. Second off, from a law enforcement perspective, what is your reaction to how these federal agents handled the shooting, and what does it say about the training these officials undergo?
So first, thank you for having me on. I'm very concerned by what I see on the video. I think most people who watch the video have been very concerned. I want to be clear, the right way to approach this kind of incident is to wait for the investigation to be complete and to have gathered all the evidence and draw the appropriate, careful conclusions. The administration didn't wait to do that and came out of the gate saying that everything about this was fine. My initial inclination is that it wasn't, but I would like an actual investigation to take place so we can really know.
Fair enough. What is your view of the fact that local law enforcement say they've been shut out by the Department of Homeland Security?
I think that's completely inappropriate. Federal law enforcement and state and local law enforcement need to coordinate. They need to work together all the time in a million different ways. This type of use of force incident would normally be investigated by many agencies, including federal and state local, and they should be allowed to conduct their investigation.
The Department of Homeland Security was formed 11 days after the September 11th terrorist attacks, and the office oversaw and coordinated a comprehensive national strategy to safeguard the country against terrorism and respond to any future attacks. This is according to its website. We remember there were calls in the wake of George Floyd's murder and nationwide protests to dismantle DHS. Do you think the agency has veered from its original purpose, and if so, did it need to?
I think DHS has an extremely important mission. I think DHS has always needed certain reforms. I think that in the wake of the second Trump administration, the need for those reforms have become blatantly obvious to anybody who cares to see it.
What kind of reforms?
Look, I think there's some, we do not need the type of federal presence in Minneapolis that we see today. I think that is, and this is because of that presence, this is a crisis of the administration's own making. They could fix it whenever they wanted to. They could simply draw down. pull many of these agents back, go back to the way immigration enforcement has historically been conducted, which is much more careful, much more targeted, not door to door, not massive sweeps, not massive shock and awe presence in a city. And we could go back to that anytime.
Deborah Fleischaker, thank you.
Joining us now is CBS News law enforcement contributor and former Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison. Rodney Harrison, it's good to see you this morning. Perhaps you can help us make sense of this. What do you see when you look at that video? Frame by frame is very compelling.
So good morning, and I have some concerns, and first and foremost, condolences to the Pretti family. This is a horrible tragedy that occurred, but we also have to take a deeper dive into the video that was captured in this incident. And, you know, initially the agents are in some type of engagement with Mr. Pretti and asking him to move back. Doesn't seem to be some type of compliance. Mr. Pretti looks like he's trying to help up one of the other observers. While that happens, the agents get him on the ground. Now, this is where the problem occurs. One of the agents, and the audio didn't capture this, they scream out, "Hey, he's got a gun. He's got a gun, gun." You hear that several times. Now, at this time, was Mr. Pretti being compliant and showing his hands to the agents? And I want to believe that when one of the agents pulled out the firearm from his waistband, that lack of communication was not there, which continued the fear for the other agents that were surrounding Mr. Pretti, which caused them to use deadly physical force. Horrible tragedy. Horrible tragedy.
Rodney, they may have said gun, gun, but is there anything in the video that shows you that Mr. Pretti grabbed the gun and was brandishing it at the agents? I think the whole crux here is, was he threatening the agents? The agents said they were in fear of their lives. From what we see, he's sprayed with pepper spray. He's down on the ground with several officers on top of him. How does it seem like the officers were in fear of their lives from what you can see in this video?
Well, it's hard to tell. And once again, this is why an investigation needs to be done. It needs to be neutral, it needs to be unbiased, and it needs to be partnered with the federal investigators as well as the state attorney's office to make sure to get down to the bottom of it. The one recommendation that I will share is that these agents need to wear body-worn cameras. You know, they have a very difficult job, and wearing body-worn cameras will be able to explain the multiple incidents that they happen to go through, as well as use some of the things that they're observing and use it for training for themselves as well going into the future.
I'm curious, when you say it's hard to tell, what's hard to tell in that video?
So when you have all the agents surrounding Mr. Pretti and you can't see where his hands are, and I think I just want to make a quick judgment here, and once again, it's a split-second call. Did Mr. Pretti have his hands available or accessible to the agents, and was there a fear that he was reaching somewhere to potentially pull out the firearm that was already pulled out by one of the agents, which it seems like there might have been a lack of communication regarding that he was unarmed at this time.
Okay, we should also mention again, he was pepper sprayed. I've never been pepper sprayed, but I hear it pretty much incapacitates you. But Rodney Harrison, thank you so much for your expertise. We really appreciate it.